There's something endlessly compelling about Roberto Baggio, a footballer whose name conjures up the image of artistry and vulnerability in equal measure. He is the sort of figure whose legend endures not because he was flawless, but precisely because he was not. His career, a patchwork of genius, resilience, and heartbreak, is the kind of tale that lingers in the minds of fans long after the final whistle. He was a footballer of the highest caliber, yes, but he was also an emblem of what it means to be human, brilliant, yet imperfect, triumphant, yet scarred. And somehow, even now, years after his retirement, his story feels alive. Born on the 18th of February 1967 in Caldogno, a sleepy northern Italian town, Roberto Baggio's early life was far removed from the grandeur and drama that would come to define him. Football wasn't just a hobby for the young Roberto, it was an obsession. His extraordinary talent became obvious long before he had the vocabulary to articulate it. Local scouts first noticed his precocious skills, and by the time he was 15, Vicenza, a small team languishing in Italy's lower leagues, took a chance on the wiry teenager. The teenage Baggio was already something of a paradox. He was shy, yet he played football with a flamboyant flair that belied his quiet personality. In his professional debut for Vicenza in 1982, his technical skill and vision were there for all to see. A dazzling dribbler with an uncanny ability to find space where there appeared to be none, Baggio quickly became Vicenza's shining star. It wasn't long before bigger clubs started sniffing around. By 1985, Fiorentina, one of the grand old clubs of Serie A, had come calling. The transfer was significant not just for Baggio, but for what it would signify in the years to come. Florence would be the place where he became a national sensation, the place where his ponytail, something he later described as a spur-of-the-moment style choice, became as iconic as his free kicks. Fiorentina's fans didn't just admire Baggio, they adored him. His dribbles, his feints, his ability to conjure something out of nothing, it was all mesmerizing. Watching Baggio play was like watching an artist paint with fire, unpredictable, mesmerizing, and always thrilling. But Baggio's relationship with Fiorentina wasn't just about the football, it was about the city, its people, and their deep emotional investment in him. When Juventus, Fiorentina's bitter rivals, purchased Baggio in 1990 for a record-breaking fee, the reaction in Florence was one of fury and despair. Riots erupted in the streets. It was as though a member of the family had been sold off to a sworn enemy. And yet, in a moment that would define his career as much as any goal, Baggio proved that loyalty could exist even in the cutthroat world of professional football. In his first match for Juventus against Fiorentina, a penalty was awarded. Baggio, Juventus's star signing, should have been the one to take it. Instead, he refused. "My heart was still purple," he admitted later, referring to Fiorentina's team colors. It was a decision that enraged Juventus fans, but endeared him forever to those in Florence. Baggio's career was full of such moments, acts of humanity and decency that stood in stark contrast to the cold professionalism of the modern game. Despite this rocky start, Baggio's time at Juventus was marked by undeniable success. In 1993, he was crowned FIFA World Player of the Year.
And the well-deserved world champion player.
That same year, he led Juventus to a UEFA Cup victory, scoring key goals with a composure that bordered on arrogance. His style was effortless, almost hypnotic. Baggio wasn't the fastest player on the pitch, nor was he the most physically imposing, but his intelligence and technical ability made him unstoppable. And yet, even during his peak years at Juventus, there was a sense that Baggio's career would always be tinged with melancholy. Injuries began to plague him, testing his resilience in ways few footballers ever experience. By 1995, despite helping Juventus to a Serie A title, he was deemed surplus to requirements and moved to AC Milan. For most players, such a transition might have been seamless, a step from one elite club to another. For Baggio, it was another chapter in a career that seemed to defy conventional logic. His 2 years at Milan were a mixed affair. In his first season, Milan won the Serie A title, but Baggio's role was a supporting one, far removed from the starring performances he had delivered in Turin. He was never one to make a fuss, though. "Football is about the team, not the individual," he said at the time, though you could sense his frustration bubbling beneath the surface. By 1997, Milan had moved on, and Baggio, ever the journeyman, found himself at Bologna. What happened next was nothing short of remarkable. At Bologna, a club with far fewer resources and expectations, Baggio rediscovered his magic. He scored 22 goals in the 97-98 season, the highest tally of his career. It was a statement, a reminder that he was still Roberto Baggio, still capable of moments that could take your breath away. His performances earned him a move to Inter Milan, though his time there was largely forgettable. By 2000, Baggio had joined Brescia, where he would spend the final years of his career. He may not have been playing on the grandest stage anymore, but his talent never dimmed. Brescia fans were treated to vintage Baggio, free kicks that curled impossibly into the top corner, dribbles that left defenders chasing shadows.
163 gol nella sua carriera.
He retired in 2004, leaving behind a legacy that was as complex as it was brilliant. Internationally, Baggio's story is perhaps even more dramatic. He made his debut for Italy in 1988, but it was at the 1990 World Cup that he began to show the world what he was capable of. In an early group match, he scored a goal that can only be described as sublime, weaving his way through the Czechoslovakian defense with the ease of someone threading a needle. But it was the 1994 World Cup in the United States where Baggio truly became a global icon. Italy stumbled through the group stage, and it seemed as though they were destined for an early exit. Then Baggio took over. In the knockout rounds, he was nothing short of sensational. His goals against Nigeria, Spain and Bulgaria carried Italy to the final against Brazil, and for a moment, it seemed as though he was destined to deliver football's greatest prize to his country. Instead, the final became the scene of his most infamous moment. The match ended 0-0 after extra time, and the World Cup was to be decided by penalties. With Brazil leading 3-2, Baggio stepped up to take Italy's fifth penalty. He had to score to keep his team's hopes alive. What happened next is burned into the memory of every football fan. His shot sailed over the crossbar, and with it, Brazil were champions. "I still think about it," Baggio admitted years later. "It's a moment that stays with you, no matter how many times you try to forget." The missed penalty, while devastating, did nothing to diminish Baggio's standing. If anything, it made him more relatable. Here was a player who had carried his country on his back, who had given everything he had, and who, in the end, had fallen just short. It was heartbreak, yes, but it was also deeply human. Baggio's international career continued, and he became the first Italian to score in 3 different World Cups when he found the net in 1998. By the time he retired from international football, he had scored 27 goals in 56 appearances, a remarkable record for someone who often played as a creative playmaker rather than a traditional striker. After his retirement, Baggio largely stepped away from the spotlight. He became a global ambassador for the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations.
8 persone su 10 sono gli abitanti del Corno d'Africa che vivono di agricoltura. Da più di un anno non piove.
Dedicating himself to humanitarian causes. His autobiography, Una porta nel cielo, A Goal in the Sky, offered a rare glimpse into the mind of a man who had always been more complex than his public persona suggested. "Football gave me everything," he wrote, "but it also took a lot from me." Even now, years after his final match, Roberto Baggio's legacy endures. He is remembered not just as a footballer, but as a symbol of artistry, resilience, and vulnerability. His career was a tapestry of beauty and imperfection, of moments that made you cheer and moments that made you cry. And perhaps that's why he remains so beloved. Baggio wasn't just a player, he was a story, and what a story it was.